There we go. Right. So this week we are talking about lifters' emotions, what coaching actually is. I should have kept that tab open as to what the questions were. 1 second. Well, it's going to look great at the start recording. Lifters' emotions, what is coaching? What advice would we give to a new coach? So did anyone have specific elements that they wanted to run into first? I know you had some bits. Anyone got anything?
I also looked around when you looked at her. You were like, you've got some bits, right? She went, yeah, you.
It's really
We're just both looking off in the distance like, someone fucking help us.
I have an interesting point about initial emotions versus like a recollected version of those emotions. So we deal with that as a coach a lot. So some people in like their sessions will just shit the bed and we'll be like, okay, maybe we'll leave this till later and we'll have like when they're all rational, then we'll discuss it then. So that's kind of like the point I had in my notes.
So I think one of the big things there about like what people's perspective is in that moment, how they're perceiving the thing, what their framing is versus when they look back at it objectively. Actually was joking about this in the athlete chat because Jasmine had this where she hit sets of squats and was like, this is absolutely terrible. And the next morning I got a message being like, I've watched it back, it's actually pretty good. So how do people react to that? Like if you get a message from a client who's, let's say it's like very high on that spectrum of this is fucking shit, it's gone terribly and so on. What are our first responses?
Why do you think it was shit? Tell me why you think it was bad.
Moved terribly, it was a shit show.
Yeah, but more like technically, like where do you think the breakdown occurred? Like, so I want them to actually self-analyze and tell me why they thought it was bad. And if I agree, we can then work on those points and say objectively how we're then going to move forward from there. So I want them to be more rational in their response. So rather than come to me with a problem, say, okay, we can start to work on a solution here.
So is that something in that moment of postponing the conversation to when they have the rational perspective? Because obviously asking that of someone in that moment, I'm just going to do an immediate call out and be like, Adam, we've had this in that moment of being like, this is fucking shit. I'm like, let's talk about it in an hour.
Yeah, that's what the point I was going to raise is the experience of the athlete and what they've kind of been through already. So I've had like times where I've shit the bed in the session, but then now sometimes it happens, but I don't message Callum about it. I'll wait until later or even the next day to get back to when my thoughts are rational. So I think there's an element of how experienced an athlete is, depending on how fast you get back to them.
Beck, how do you deal with this?
Because I think coming to the athlete, like athlete comes to you like, oh, terrible day. And you would reply with, okay, let's talk about this later. I feel that can have a bit of a negative thought from the athlete in terms of like, oh, you don't care about fixing this now, do you? Initially. So the wonderful thing of just seeing the message, knowing what it's about, not opening it so they don't know you've opened it, and not replying to it because you're then deliberately postponing it, knowing that you can then reply in that hour instead of telling them you're going to reply in the hour. You reply in the hour and be like, okay, how are you feeling now? But the other way that I'm looking at it is I've just gone through some check-ins, had some negative responses, and I'm going through. I'm like, look, I do want to try and reframe your mindset around this, because lifting isn't that deep. We're picking stuff up and putting it down. It means a lot to us, but we're picking stuff up and putting it down. One bad session over 365 days will not ruin your progress, will not take you away from the goal. The other thing to go is like, go and look at their goals and say, this is our process. We're getting there. The other thing is the rule of thirds. Like, third of your sessions are going to be good, third are going to be bad, third are going to be average. If it's not really following that rule, then you may not be pushing hard enough, or you're pushing too hard, and we can reevaluate.
I think each one of those depends on the type of athlete, right? Like there are some people you can message in that moment and being like, okay, so what's the next thing we need to do, and have you let's say they've just had a squat session, the end of the squats they said are terrible, and been like, right, before we discuss anything else, what do we have for bench today? Let's get your mindset on that. And like that might be a temporary solution to not cause a longer term problem, so they don't wreck the entire session. Some people, as you say, like going, well, that was a deadlift session, it's only accessories now, let me delay the response so that I can then talk to you when you've cooled down, and there's a very high chance that we're going to have a far more productive conversation. I think the best bit you're saying there about like within check-ins especially is kind of reviewing what are our expectations from training, especially if it's not on a week that really is a precursor. So if we haven't set up being like, right, week 4, we're looking for this outcome, this is what we're anticipating. If it's a week 3 or week 2 being like, okay, well, this still falls within anticipation. Like I'm applying the 30-30-30 of, well, theoretically, one of these sessions wasn't going to feel great. That's potentially that one. We've ticked that off. That's not a bad thing. I think a lot of the time, I think it's fair to say I normally have a fair degree of stress when someone's having great training for a prolonged period of time, more because of how they react when it goes wrong. I actually had this conversation with Harriet today, and I'll name people so I know these people have watched these, but also because they'll understand how it applies to them. But Harriet had like 6 months, constant linear progress. Nothing we could do would go badly. And then one session, she was like, this all feels shit. This is terrible. I've stopped making progress. And I was like, that's what happens when it goes too well for too long, where it's almost you're not ready for hard work and being like, these are going to happen. This is part of the process. It genuinely almost concerns me when they don't have that for too long, where they don't have a bad session, where it's like, cool, we can do bad sessions. That's part of the game. Thoughts?
I think it's actually harder to do. Sorry.
Well, I looked at Alice and she just stared ahead.
So
like she was.
I don't actually know what to say to that.
I was
thinking mine's coming, isn't it? Because I'm having really good training at the moment. I'm
yeah.
Like, great.
This one's PB'd every session.
It's
A
coming.
bad one's on the horizon at some point. Go on, Lucy, what are you going to say?
I think it's actually from my own experience as well. It's difficult when you hit a bad session after constantly being good, but it's also quite reassuring that you do have one of those, because it makes you realize that you're actually not, you're not Superman, like you're just like everyone else, and then you can kind of understand where those errors are coming from. But I had it recently where someone literally messaged me like, I'm crying in the gym, squats have gone amazing, I've gone to bench and I'm crying and I don't even know why. And then they stepped away, they kind of removed themselves from the gym situation and then went back to finish their session later on in the day. But it wasn't anything to do with the session, it was just that externals, emotions, etc. kind of just all came at once. And I think that was personally harder to deal with than a squat being the reason or a bench being the reason, because that I can kind of almost fix, that I can kind of be like, well, it's okay, everything's been great, we've got this data behind us, we were always going to, maybe it was a warm-ups, maybe it was a technique, but what do you do when they've just had a meltdown because of something completely unrelated? It just so happened to be in the gym.
I think the really go on, Adam, you go.
I was going to say I think there's a line that you draw, because obviously externals probably drive the majority of the motion in that gym session. So like if the squat didn't go well, it's the external that is like sort of the fire, but then that just ignites it just to a new level. So I think there's a time where you discuss the externals, so probably in the check-ins, but address the internals as much as you can, if that makes sense.
I think one of the big things that I wanted to add to there, because Beck mentioned it, and it is almost one of the hardest things to tread the line on, of being like, lifting's not that deep. Like if you've got substantial externals, let's say they've just been fired from their job and they're like, and bench is shit. I'm like, well, that's a 99% stressor of your job's a problem, and 1% is your bench today. And be like, it's not that big a factor. So if you need to go bench later on, go bench later on. Is it going to have a knock on for like 2 sessions? Sure. And fucking what? Like, we're going to do this for years. This is literally a drop in an ocean of sessions. And I say it's difficult because it is that perfect balance of being like, absolute respect for how passionate people are about this sport, how much it means to them and so on, but also being like, but no individual session should carry that stress. Like there should be, in theory, no session that has that degree of value that starts to have a knock on to your mental well-being to that extent. So if there's an external stressor being like, then bring training down a little bit. It's okay for a short-term fallback for your long-term mental well-being on the rest of life. That really, that's where your income probably is. That's probably where your well-being is. Those factors probably are more relevant. Cool, loads of stuff, lots of nodding, same page.
I'm all for like disassociating yourself from external stresses in the gym, and I actually feel like that's why my training's going so well at the moment, because I feel like I have a lot of stress going on externally that I'm just channeling into my session. But yeah, I don't know, I'm finding it easier and easier, sort of just being like, there's nothing that I can control with those external stresses when I'm training. Like I'm mid squat, no, I can't sort out shifts at work. I'm literally, I feel like if you're able to disassociate yourself and realize that once you're in the gym, you can't really do anything. So just enjoy that moment, because that might be the best bit of your day.
I like that. I was going to say, one of the people I feel might be the best at that, well, I don't know if I'm wrong, Beck, I feel like this is a skill you particularly have of separation from externals while training. Like you don't even listen to music, so you're not using anything else to kind of pull you away.
Yeah, and it's something that I would advise for my athletes. It is actually someone I said in my check-in is, like, you've got all this external stress going on. I think it could be, the gym is a great opportunity, because other athletes use this, is like, it's a separation. It's, I've got all this crazy shit in my life. Well, training isn't part of that. Training's like downtime. Training, yeah, physically stressful. You got the mental side of lifting, but ultimately it's nothing to do with all that other stuff. Like Alice said, you can't control it. You can't control the other stuff in the gym. So yeah, personally, I've got, I'd say, a relative gift of whatever's going on outside, I can almost forget, go and train, and then I can come back out of the gym and go, oh, well,
You're sad again.
yeah.
Is there anything you've done to practice for that? Like anything you reinforce, or is that just Beck?
It's probably just me, to be honest, but at the same time, it could come from the notion of like knowing what I can control and knowing what I can't control, right? Like there's times where, you know, you get really bad news about someone, but can you fix that? No. You may be like initially very sad about it, or you know something's going to happen to that person. But is there any point being sad about it now? When you know you're going to be sad about it when it happens. So save it for when it happens. Potentially.
There's the genuine. So there's something I heard someone say on this, which was, if you can be sad for you know, when someone's sort of like, I'm just having a bad day for no reason, like, then why can't you be happy for no reason? Or like turn up to the gym and be like, right, fresh slate. And that seems like such a talent which I definitely don't possess. But being able to go into the gym and be like, right, this, as you said, which I really love, this could end up being the best bit of my day. So like being able to go, right, fresh slate, let's go do something here that could be the best thing. And then I can go back to the misery of life. That bit might not be the lesson I pass on.
I feel like as well, like the whole mind over matter thing is like a skill in itself to like get used to. But one thing, like especially coming back from traveling and being injured and like working with Callum to say, actually, I really want to change my mindset in approach to my training, has been that I refuse to let those things interrupt my training, because my training is so important to me and my happiness and my well-being. So instead of being like, I'm going to ignore them, I say I actually refuse to let them ruin my session. And every time I'm sort of impatient and think, oh, you know, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I'm just like, no, I don't. I choose to do this. And I'm not going to let there be a negative spin on this session. Actually, like every time I go to do a lift, I try and like hype myself up, whether it's just like having a little dance, jumping around, whatever it is, something that boosts my mood, and reminding myself that actually I'm really privileged to get to do this. Like I love doing this, and if I don't, then why am I here? And then I always reach the conclusion that I'm happy and I'm really enjoying this. So yeah, that's the way that I separate it out, is like, I will not let anything bad interrupt this session because this is for me.
How do you guys teach someone how to do that when they don't have it innately?
I think I was going to say, I think part of it is placing expectations on the session as well. So if you're placing, oh, I have to do this session, and it doesn't happen, it adds fuel to that fire. Whereas if you sort of erase that expectation and just go into that session with an open mind of what could happen, I think that's a lot more beneficial.
One of the things I like within it is the same thing I give people for general productivity. I'm talking to people about what to do with their day, like 3 wins, 3 musts. Same sort of principle within training of being like, it would be a win if it's a particular weight, but the must would be, did I do great warm-ups today? Did I give myself the right intent to do it? Did I apply execution bits better? So that I can celebrate those things which are so in my control, no matter what the weight ends up being. And then the wins are, it was a good weight, or it was a PB, or it was an increase in E1RM. Like those are the things that would be a nice add-on. But there are so many things that are variables that people just suck at celebrating, of being like, I made great choices today and that'll pay off next week. It means fuck all for right now because I didn't get to have a cool session. No one's posting it on Instagram, but next week, the week after, the month after is off of sessions like that. That's just the thing people are bad at celebrating about. I know Lucy's smiling because me and her have spoken about this literally over the last 2 weeks.
I'm so guilty for it. And it's something that I feel like such a hypocrite for saying, because I'm telling all my guys, like, I don't care what the weight is actually at like certain moments in time. I don't want you to push. I want you to hit RPEs. And some of them are like consistently overshooting because every week they want that weight to increase, but it stayed as a 6 because it's meant to be there to improve your technique, not to improve your strength. And it's I suppose almost the kind of, not necessarily the standard of athlete, but kind of the level that they're at, that understanding of celebrating and hitting the RPE correctly is actually more beneficial than hitting a PB.
Especially if they're looking to.
I mean, I hate it myself, so I can completely understand why. But like even after 8 years, learning that it's like such a bitter pill to swallow, because you're so like fixated on seeing that progress, seeing the weight goes up, but especially like when you're peaking for comp. I mean, I know it's kind of a completely different ballgame because you're thinking about so many other things, but even when you hit a weight at the same RPE, even though you've lost body weight, like no one ever celebrates that, but that's actually a big deal.
I had this exact conversation with Max Lewis yesterday of him being like, oh, I've squatted this for 2 before and it was slightly easier. I was like, and you were 10 kilos heavier. Like, that's a massive change inside of, I think it was a 4-month turnaround. And being like, but no one likes it if someone posts something like it's a body weight PB, because then people, they feel like it's a disingenuous thing to celebrate. But like, that's a massive variable change. And that's another thing that we suck at celebrating is, okay, so it's the same weight that you've tripled before, but it's the best it's ever moved. And saying like a match PB almost feels like you're saying to the world, I've done exactly this before, exactly this way. But that's why I think internal celebration of what you're crediting and what you're giving time to matters a lot more. I do think this is probably within the soft skills that's quite hard to do with a lot of people, because if they're not having that conversation with you, it's quite hard to develop. Because the main point here, like obviously we're talking about all these assets as an athlete, and people watching this, you'd hope they would develop it. But as Kun rightly asks, how do you teach them to have it? And how many things that within a check-in really service that sort of thing? So what questions you're asking. So when it's like, what was the positive markers, as opposed to what were the PBs, what were the PRs you hit? Teaching people that thing. What is a positive marker? You look back over the training, we're familiar enough with their training to say, well, that's a great data point, or that's better execution, or I saw in your video analysis that you did your video analysis this week. Like helping them understand what's worth celebrating.
So they need to communicate with us first their negative thoughts so we can actually verbalize and twist it around.
How many people have had a client say, I'm really sorry for complaining? Or do they just complain like shit? They just complain and they're like, we're not sorry, this is for you.
Yeah, well, they just want me to fix all their problems, which I can't do all of them. I can try and fix any programming, but like, that's about it. I just wanted to also throw in my big nose at Com's question of how do you teach it, is there are actual like drills, and like we train to get stronger. You can train your mindset. There are exercises that you can do to help improve your perspective, go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, all of these things. Like, and if you as the coach have that toolkit similar to physios, the athlete probably won't do it if you give them their homework to do, but the ones that want to do it will do it. And if they're still having the same thoughts of like, oh, I'm not getting any better, or this is a problem, that's a problem, you'd be like, well, have you done the exercises that I told you to do, which are just as important as the like squats that you've done? Like that's an element as well. And we're pointing out all of these like obstacles, but maybe if we change the term of it to like learning opportunity, right? But it can reframe the whole perspective of what an obstacle is. Obstacle, oh, it's this roadblock in my way. Okay, well, what have you learned? Like, you had a bad session, you think that's going to ruin your progress. That was an obstacle. What did you learn from that session? Ah, it's kind of bad. I didn't really sleep much the day before. Okay, well, your sleep's important. Wasn't really hydrated. Yeah, well, fucking drink. You know, I didn't have 24 hours between my sessions like I usually do. Okay, well then that's something to learn from and go and like take forward.
2 minutes ago, it sounds like Beck's like, right, let's meditate together. 2 minutes later, it's like, well, fucking idiot. Love the perspective. But I do like no more so than like rehab exercise, right? Someone's like, I've got a dodgy shoulder. Here's these 3 things to do. And they're like, that sounds boring. No. And they're like, well, your shoulder's still dodgy. Exactly as you say. How many people watching this, or even ourselves, how many people practice anything to do with their mentality? Like, have worked with a sports psychologist to sit down. Lucy's face of being like, oh, I suck at this. But how much time really, like, as one of the biggest toolboxes, and I suppose, again, this comes to not necessarily level of athlete, but type of athlete, the sheer beginners who are going to make easy progress will see the least value. The people shooting towards being elite or have been in the game for longer have made that easy progress. They're now doing the much more data specific progress, whatever it may well be. They'll see more value in it, but them just having access to it. Because I would also say, like, how many people do we know sports psychologists really in the UK? It's quite a limited field. And it's also something that feels quite boring to talk about, because people, it's like, if I post about rehab, no interaction, no one gives a shit because it sounds boring. But I would say mentality outside of the program itself, even more valuable than everything that a coach does. I'd say, like, just what time people put into their own mentality might be the most valuable thing. Unless I'm missing some really important shit there, but it seems way more important.
I'd also say, like, it's going back to knowing your lifter, because it's such a nuanced way to handle something that can be quite fragile. Like, you may have lifters, like coaches like Beck, who knows he can go to his lifters and just be like, did you do your work? And they will give him a straightforward answer, and they will not get like defensive or upset about that. There may be some other people just saying, hey, remember that we set a specific protocol to make sure that this didn't happen. Should we, like, you know, make sure we've covered all the bases and things like that. But it's the same as programming, in the fact that you will have a protocol to make sure that these things either don't happen. We want to be preventative rather than, you know, curing things and stuff like that. So yeah, know your athlete, know the approach, but kind of like have a protocol to go over, so you're not just sort of going, I don't know what to do. You've set something in place, revisit those steps, and then you should find maybe a missing link within that, and that will give you the direction that you want to go in.
I think we covered a lot within that. What else did we have? Because otherwise we just did that one for 20 minutes.
I have how to help athletes and mentality around if they're prone to injury.
So let's talk about what prone to injury means. Because is it people prone to injury, or is it people who are not practicing increase, like, their quality of lifting, their warm-ups, the intent behind it? Because either the programming's dog, like if they're just getting injured on repeat,
nervous
about getting injured.
Yeah.
So what's the term for someone who always thinks that they're getting hurt? Someone who's
like a hypochondriac.
Hypochondriac, right? So that definitely have come across in the past. How do people deal with someone who's like innate fear over, I'll get hurt if I, oh my God, Adam, you're smiling because I've just realized you're one of them. Shit, you actually are. It wasn't even you I was thinking of. Okay, Adam. So we've discussed this one before, not on a recorded call, but you had this innate fear over loading a certain weight because it will kill me. And I will say, in theory, you're not wrong. But then how do you help someone overcome that innate fear of risk of injury?
Well, like, obviously in my environment, it's soundproof. No one can hear me if shit hits the fan. Obviously, safety's there for like squats and stuff like that. So it's more of like how would you phrase it? More of an intense feeling than if I was in a public gym where there's actually people there to see if I get hurt or whatever. But one of the phrases I keep saying in my head now is the body is far more capable of what you think, and just fucking go for it. Because before, when I wasn't coached by Callum, I loaded up some of the weights on my squat that are around like the 270 region, and I'll just put it on my back, squat it, and cool. But now when I'm thinking about it, it's I'm just overthinking the process. But it's just coming back to the body's far more capable and more tolerant than you actually think it is. So that's what I'm kind of doing at the moment.
One of the things I remind people of, well, there's two things within it. So one, you're not made of glass. Like, the body is incredibly robust. And I think there's so much stigma or just like poor terminology used by medical practitioners that give the idea that like you've got a slip disc and you're never going to fucking walk again. And like, couldn't be familiar, maybe some of us are, like, slip disc as a term is so dumb, and so much of the population would have that on an MRI, and you create this fear mongering. And I think trying to teach terminology with your lifters can be important. And the same thing with pain. Pain science is probably one of the most it's like still developing, but it's the most under-discussed and misunderstood area within all of fitness, of being like, pain signals don't mean pathology. Like, feeling something go ow does not mean that thing is damaged. It means your body didn't like that very much. Maybe be cautious of that range, or you've done something in that range before and that caused pain. Traditionally, someone who's hurt their lower back when deadlifting will get the same pain signals when deadlifting, more as their body reminding them that that happened once. Teaching lifters about that and that cycle of understanding, like, you can break chronic pain signals by stopping looking for pain signals and understanding what that signal is better. That I've seen as monstrous difference for many lifters. Some people still really struggle with it.
I think the interesting thing about the pain cycle is teaching people that actually, like Callum just said, focusing on pain, not just looking for pain, but focusing on pain will make it worse. So once you feel something, if you then just sort of like hone in on that, it's going to make it worse. And I try and take the attitude that actually, what is fear going to achieve for me? It's not going to achieve anything for me. If anything, it's probably going to get me hurt. So I once heard a phrase that you're not scared, you're excited. So every time you get that adrenaline and you start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, and my brain is like, I'm scared, I'm just like, no, I'm not, I'm excited. I'm excited for this lift. So again, it's all about trying to reframe that feeling. So every time I get the feeling, feel the adrenaline, think I don't want to do this, I'm like, actually I do, because I'm excited for this lift.
I think it's also laying out the fact that, yes, it's going to be painful. So like with Emma, as one of my examples, where she had a spinal injury, the first few weeks and months of training, she was getting pain in her back. And she kept messaging me like, I'm really scared about doing the deadlift. It's hurting my lower back. But now we're in a position that we kind of trained. And I said, look, it's going to be painful. I know that, but I'm not concerned that you're going to get further, like more injury to that region. So after like a few months of confidence building, whilst training through that pain, obviously managing what the load is on the bar and focusing on technique, she went from 25 kilo deadlift to 140 in the space of 5 blocks or something like that.
One of those points someone's going to make, being like, 130 kilo increase on your deadlift, join now. Like, absolutely.
But it's going from where she lifted to 25, it's because she was just so scared of lifting. And it's just that initial, okay, you've got pain, let's just train through that pain. I'm sort of establishing what pain is bad and what pain is good.
Can I be really annoying and flip this on its head? Because what do you actually do with someone that expects to be in pain? Because I trained for a really long time without actually realising prior to Callum. And I had a twist in my squat. So like every session it hurt my back. And then every time I deadlifted, my back would hurt. And it was just an expectation. And it wasn't something that I thought needed fixing until it got to the point where I couldn't compete. So I still do it now. Like, I don't mention pain straight away. Like, I don't jump straight on it like, oh, by the way, I'm got an issue. Kind of let it build. A few weeks later, I'm like, okay, it hasn't gone away. It's got significantly worse. Now I think there's something that we can do to fix it. So I suppose what I'm kind of asking is, like, I know you can't, as a coach, feel what your athlete feels, but if you have someone like that, are you supposed to like regularly check in, like, oh, by the way, did that hurt? How did it feel? Because I feel like some people can kind of hint about a discomfort or a potential injury, but then also be in denial about it because no one wants to go through rehab.
Actually, that's like, it's a very fair question to ask, because you literally last week posted squats being like, by the way, my back is in crippling pain while squatting. It's fine every other time. I was like, that's fucking new. But it is like, okay, so everyone in this chat has trained for a substantial period of time. So everyone has experienced a niggle or a discomfort at some point. And so most of us will go, that is okay, let me continue. How long until you're like, this is a concern? And how many of us would have expressed that? Like the amount of times I felt something was hurting and just left it and ignored it. And then our athletes are potentially doing that. Because as you say, you can't really say to someone, great squat, did it hurt? Because you're almost looking now for a problem as opposed to like actually solving anything. I don't have an immediate answer to that. Anyone got an answer to Lucy's question, or feel they do?
I think it's
Yeah,
actually,
I can say some words.
Yeah.
Shut up, Alan. You've spoken enough, Cheryl. So,
I'm
you're welcome. So, I don't think you need to ask them repeatedly, because then we run into the problem with the hypochondriac who are always looking for pain, therefore it's there. But what can we do? When do we need to do something? Like, you were always in pain and then you couldn't compete. That's when you seeked out help. Is that a bad thing? Is that not what we should do? Because everyone's perception of pain is a bit different. Like, I'll go to a massage therapist, they'll have their fucking elbow deep in my back and they're like, does it hurt? I'm like, well, yeah, but it's supposed to, isn't it? Like, and I'm not that phased. And they'll be like, oh, but 60-year-old Deirdre, I was like poking her with my finger and she was crying. I'm like, yeah, different perception of pain, right? So the amount of discomfort I'm willing to go through to get what I want, which is like get stronger, different to someone else. It could just be a case of at the start of the journey, maybe you say, hey, if you're ever in pain, maybe let me know. If the pain gets worse week on week, definitely let me know. If it stops you doing something, we need to fix it. But if it stops someone doing something, I think they're gonna seek help to fix it. So I don't really think there's much of an issue with what the process that you had was. You were like, it hurts. Hurts the same as last week. Hurts the same as last week. That's probably fine. Hurts more than last week. Probably should say something. And that would be my approach.
I think
Data will be a part of that though as well. So obviously, if there's a downwards trend in performance, then that's signaling that the pain is more significant than not.
I think so. Kun, you can correct me here because I know that you're have worked within a familiar field. Because I think I agree with Beck. I'm just trying to think whether or not that would make complete sense. So someone has an irritation. Irritation is minor, very low grade of any inflammation, so probably not going to be anything further than that. On repeat, you're just getting that same inflammation. Only if that was either the only risk would be if it became chronic because they'd just be used to that level of pain. But if it actually stopped them lifting, that's the pathology you'd be worried about, because low grade inflammation wouldn't be a concern, not within the training that we do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of workaround, and I think it's important just to help the athlete identify the difference between discomfort, pain, and injury. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Because I'm just thinking, like, so if we took an issue, for example, someone who has shoulder discomfort, 9 times out of 10, that's like some sort of impingement, head of bicep, whatever it may well be. There's an onset of tendonitis or it's an inflammation around the head of the shoulder. If it's either of those things, the treatment for these things is so fast that really, until it became a problem, the concern wouldn't be very high. It's only if I'm going to use harsh terminology, if they're stupid enough to be in excruciating pain and not talk about it, there's a limitation of what a coach can be able to do here, of being like, that's just ridiculous to not express. But I think I do agree with Beck of being like, until it actually stops you doing anything, some degree of discomfort is probably anticipated, which I don't think powerlifters like accepting, of being like, you're trying to do more than you've ever done, progressive overload at a baseline, your body doesn't love that, you're forcing adaptation, that causes discomfort. Can be hard to notice the difference.
Would it also be fair to say, like, the difference between managing something that is constant and recognizing when it's becoming cumulative? Like you say, suddenly you're just like, it's building each session and then it suddenly becomes chronic. So identifying where that cumulative process is beginning, or like Lucy said, she's got used to a level each week that wasn't really changing. So it was just like, are you just managing discomfort, or is this increasing?
I think it's definitely difficult because people adapt to a level of pain as well. So say someone's in a 1 out of 10 pain, if it increases to a 2, their tolerance tends to mark that as a 1 mentally after enough period of time. And so you kind of get to a point that someone's experiencing a 5, still rating it as a 2 or a 3. And people's pain perception can get really skewed over time. Like there might be something that someone's been like, oh yeah, my biceps hurt for the last 5 years. I've had chronic neck pain for 6 years. And I now rate that as like a 2, but if you give me that on day 1, I'd be like, it's a 6. So I think there is a degree of risk to like cumulative pain because they're going to just downgrade the rating over time, but probably doesn't really change that risk over long-term injury. Probably just more means that they're going to be in more discomfort until they express it and then you do something about it. This is a very nuanced conversation, so I won't let this one go on too long because we'll end up guessing. Who else had other bits? Otherwise, I'm just asking Alice to read off the whiteboard. It just looks like we're asking someone else. Rachel, what do you think?
Well, I added the other topics, so I thought I'd ask the questions to the group. Like, what is coaching?
Oh, it's you that added it.
Yeah, I added things to our prepared notes, right?
I gaslighted myself into thinking I did it.
You silly Billy.
No way I wrote that question.
Yeah, it was me.
So literally the question, what is coaching?
Can I just say?
I have this. Sorry, you go.
Fight.
I was going to say, pretty simple. It's guidance, not a quick fix.
How insightful. Next.
It's pretty much it. Because everyone gets a coach expecting that it's going to solve everything, and it's like it's a massive process to undergo, where we're guiding you through that. And so I think for the biggest thing is like the expectation on that coach of what athletes do them as.
So giving someone a program, is that coaching? Because that's guidance through training.
Yeah, but it's so the guidance behind that as well. So
yeah, there we go. Carry on. Dig deeper.
But it's that initial like expectation of
the best of my day. I know you're sweating, Adam. I know it.
Of course he is. He's got a fucking jumper and hoodie on. You're
It's
inside.
freezing. I'm in my gym.
I think one of the best.
Go inside.
I've seen people talk about that being a coach is like the same principle of being a driving instructor, is that you're sat beside the person, you don't have control over the car, you're just telling them, like guiding them on the selections, on the choices, you're nurturing behaviors and long-term decision making. Like what I think coaching at its core is you're developing the habits and understanding of being an athlete while building the process to make them the best athlete possible. And that's a very long answer to what is a very short question.
But that's the point. Because it's guidance, not whatever the fuck he said. Just wasn't really answering the question.
So here's a way to frame it that might, like, so that people can answer and not die sweating in their home gym, is someone leaves you, how do you know you were a successful coach for them?
If they leave better than when they started, a better
Low
athlete.
bar. So what, they hit a 2.5 kilo squat PB and you're like, I crushed.
No, a better athlete.
What's your marker?
What does it have to be, like numerical?
No, but like if you, so say someone 5 years after being coached by you, they stop coaching, they're no longer powerlifting, whatever. How would you know, or how would you know to feel that you've been successful in that job?
They're passing you on to others. So that they're giving other people recommendations to go with you.
Oh, but some people have a really low understanding of coaching where they refer anyone.
Yeah.
How many your gym have recommended? That's probably going to piss someone off.
Did they set out what they came in to achieve? Like, did you help facilitate them achieve their goals? That's it. That's all I have to say.
There's one person I coached who he was like, I want to hit, I can't remember the numbers, but let's just say it was a 200 squat, a 120 bench, and a 240 deadlift. He hit all three and then stopped coaching. But it didn't feel successful to me. Like, it was exactly what he'd asked to do. For me, I think there's a little bit more towards that I'd want to have a shift of, I think the mentality matters to me. If someone left and I thought they'd go to another sport and still be successful, I think that would be important in the measure to me. So developing someone, as you say, as an athlete, but because it changed their character to some end. Like, I know these are probably outside of really what matters at the core of coaching, but they have value to me. I'd want to know these people make better decisions, that they understand how to handle stresses, that they have a competency and a work ethic that shifts. And they, for me, are some of the most important markers. Obviously, quantifiable progress as well matters.
So
Beck,
maybe because I'd
see
see some of my athletes again, that if we left on very amicable terms, like I could still say hello to them, if we could like go and have a coffee or something, like if you could still kind of have a relationship with that person, if you're not necessarily an athlete or a coach, I feel like that's still a positive. So you put something on your Instagram recently, like the coach that you started with doesn't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily be the one that you are still with now as you've progressed, because you may have changed, you may have developed, and if it's your mate down the gym that's done a qualification for themselves a coach, then maybe that's something that you should be moving away from. And I think that's something I would still find beneficial, that I've kind of nurtured this kind of gym girl into being a powerlifter, into being someone that's competitive, into being someone that is now taking it seriously, reaching for a higher or better or different service to kind of trial the market, because like you could still be the best coach in the world, but you're still not giving that person everything that is out there because you're different to other individuals, which I also think, not trying to intentionally big you up or anything, but is what's good about DBD, because you've got so many different coach feeding into the whole community that you can kind of get feedback from other people as well.
Beck, I know it was your question, but how would you have answered this?
I probably would have dug into the elements of coaching, right? And pointed out the fact that prescription, telling someone to do something, isn't the element of coaching. I want to pick into more of the soft skills we've already touched on, of the interperson like relationships, but understand at the same time that people pay for a coach, not a friend. So, when you're not licking their ass and calling them a good boy all the time and stroking their ego, it's fine. You don't have to be their best friend. They don't have to message you about what they had for breakfast. Okay. You don't have to be happy about it all. Okay. You don't need to know everything about that person, but you also do need to know enough to guide them through any obstacles, any wins, like take them where they want to go. But it's how do we do that? Because there's plenty of people out there with their level 2 and level 3 PT qualification thinking they're the fucking big bollocks. They competed one time, dishing out programs and being like, I'm a coach. You get one check in a week. It's like, how are you in one check in a week copy and pasting programs to people coaching? What communication are you delivering? What methods are you delivering it in? Are you providing any video analysis? Are you communicating with different people in different ways based on what they need? Like this level of guidance and detail, and it's the methods, not just I can do it. Because at the moment, you go and search for a powerlifting coach. 90% of the people we're all doing the same thing. You can always message us. We're always giving you program updates. We're all doing video analysis, but like, what makes it different?
Two things. One, do you ever in the midst of a conversation know the point someone's commenting on a YouTube video? I'm like, I know for a fact while Beck was just talking, there's someone writing a comment being like, who's the pure gym coach you fucking hate?
All of them.
So I think that the big bit there, like you say, like everyone says they're a coach. So everyone posts 24/7 communication, which is nonsense. They all post video analysis. They all post that they do bespoke programming. So that bit is to call yourself a coach, which is nonsensical. So to be a great coach, predominantly within that soft skills, is how you develop decision making with that athlete over time. How much you get to know the decisions to make, right? Like, so writing the next block, the first block you write, probably the easiest block. The next block you write is all of the decisions based off the information you learn. The one a year later is one of the hardest ones of being like, what's the things that we've learned? How experimental can we be? I think that constant developing process is one of the most valuable things about a good coach, is someone who's really trying to learn about you. And like you say, as Beck says, I don't need to know what you had on your toast in the morning, but I do know what you respond to over time. I do know what direction you want to go. One of the things that came to mind with this, and I don't know if you'd say it contributes to your level of success, but Beck, for you, I remember having a conversation with Jamie Ruffle and him saying one of his favorite thing about being coached by you was that you were both growing. And so he started with you very early on in your online coaching, and him seeing how much your decision making, your the video analysis developed, your like eye for detail, those things, like what a spectrum of things that is to develop over time. I do think athletes seeing coaches grow with them, learn more about them, almost I said to one of my athletes, I almost wanted them to be an assistant coach in the process with me, of like, I want you to be as invested in this as I am, where it's like, we're doing the program, ask me the questions, tell me what you're thinking about things, because I'm making choices, but I want you to be involved. I think that's probably some of the most satisfying and what I would feel successful coaching, where 3 years down the line, I'm working with someone and we're both still developing that process. That feels like the best coaching I've done.
Yeah, if the athlete after X amount of time hasn't learned anything about what you're doing, what the process is, they're either not interested, or you as a coach probably haven't explained things, or like you're not getting them invested. Like I say to all my guys, or at least I hope I have, that I don't want to coach you forever. Ideally, at some point, you're going to go, hey, I don't need you. I can coach myself effectively, but I want to stay. Like I value this work together. It also takes the whole coaching off my plate kind of thing. But to have them at a point where they could theoretically do what I do would be ideal.
I always say as well, like mentality that I think kind of ties in with this message is that I can give you all the tools that you need to succeed, but I can't use them for you. So I will be there to help you use them and understand them and put everything into place that you need to. But I also need you to work with me to make sure that you are successful.
I know there's a ton more on this we could discuss, but I said we'd try to keep this 45 minutes, and that is 45 minutes. So any things that anyone wrote down, say.
Wonderful. Catch you guys later.
Wait.
Okay.
We'll add any of those onto future calls. So the bits that you have, make a note of, throw them on the shared document. And just a very quick one to people who watch this, it's so nice to receive all the comments saying how much people enjoy it. If you could just comment that on the videos, that would be fucking great, because I don't need the message.
And subscribe.
Hey, comments are welcome.
Subscribe.
We won't reply to them.